The morning of July the 11th, 1887 came gray and heavy over the Wyoming territory, the kind of gray that tasted of iron and distant smoke. Bronwyn Holloway walked the wagon road that led from her property down into Black Fork, a tin pail of goat's milk in one hand and the lead rope of an old buckskin mule in the other. She was 32 years old. She wore black still 7 months after her husband's burying, and the black had gone rust-colored at the shoulders from the sun. She did not hurry. She had stopped hurrying sometime in March, 100 yards from the fork in the road where the pine stump still bore the old brand of the Holloway outfit. 3 men stood smoking against the split rail fence that divided the public road from the eastern grazing land of the Diamond B. The lead man was thick-set and broad at the jaw, a beard the color of rusted wire on his face, a paint horse tied slack behind him. Silas Brockway, the man who had come to her door the 3rd week after she buried her husband and had left her bleeding in her own yard. He turned as she passed. The other 2 kept talking, not looking up. Bronwyn did not stop. She did not drop her eyes. She met his look and held it. And then, without breaking her stride, she gave him the smallest nod. It was not the nod of a woman afraid. It was not the nod of a woman begging safe passage. It was the nod of a person who had known someone in another life a life ago and was acknowledging that, yes, the ledger between them was still open. And yes, she remembered the amount. Silas Brockway's mouth opened half an inch. He turned his head away too quickly. Bronwyn walked on. The mule's hooves clocked against the dry ruts. Above them, somewhere out of sight, a hawk called twice. She did not look back. She had lived in this valley 5 years. She had buried one husband here, and she had been beaten near to death in this same yard on the 4th night of April. And she had, between those 2 events, watched 117 men try and fail to ride the black stallion her husband had raised from a foal. She had stopped counting their names. She counted only their number in the little leather book she kept in the kitchen drawer beside the pepper tin. The number this morning was 117. By nightfall Saturday, if Silas Brockway kept his word, it would be higher. Her land lay on the north fork of the creek that gave the valley its name. 480 acres. Her husband had bought it in 1881 from a German family named Kohler, who had gone back east to bury a daughter and never returned. Elias Holloway had paid $340 cash and had built with his own hands the 2-story house of milled pine and the big pole barn that still stood behind it, smelling of hay and horse and axle grease. He had dug the well. He had laid every fence post on the property with a maul and a bucket of tamp gravel, working sundown to sundown for 7 years. He had died in November. A neighbor's half-broke gelding had thrown him wrong against a corral post. The doctor from Cheyenne said his neck had snapped clean, which the doctor had meant as mercy. Bronwyn did not find it merciful. She found it quiet. And quiet in her experience was the worst of all the things that could be done to a person. She turned the mule into the yard and tied him loose to the iron ring by the pump. She carried the milk pail into the kitchen and set it on the stone slab beside the churn. She washed her hands in the enamel basin. The water was cold enough to sting, and when the cold hit her skin, her eyes went for a moment far away. In the flicker of that cold, she was 24 again, and she was walking up the gravel drive of a tall brick house in the Toxteth district of Liverpool. It was winter. 1879. The hedge was wet and black. She carried a leather music satchel under one arm, and she was humming a Welsh lullaby under her breath, because the two small girls inside the house, the Hargrave girls, would not begin their piano lesson if she did not hum first. Her father was still alive then. Her mother had been dead 11 years. Her sister Neris was 16 away at a dressmaker's school in Chester, and wrote letters every Sunday. The envelopes always marked in the same looped hand, the same cramped corners. She had been happy in that life in a way she had not known at the time was happiness. She had thought happiness was a larger weather. She had not understood that it was only the quiet hours, a brick hedge, a satchel, a song for small girls. The name Brockway came into the Hargrave house on a Tuesday afternoon, the end of January, carried in by her father's solicitor in a state of white-lipped apology. Her father, a small wool merchant who had stood surety on a trade bond for a friend, was about to be bankrupt. The friend had sailed. The friend's name was Dirk Brockway. He had sailed for New York 2 weeks before with her father's name still pinned to a promissory note that no one else would honor. Bronwyn was 24 years old. She stopped humming. The cold water ran in her sleeve. She shook it off. The Wyoming kitchen came back around her in its dim heat, the iron stove ticking a horsefly drumming at the pane. She dried her hands. She stood a moment with the towel in her fingers. On the far wall above the writing desk that had been her husband's a drawer was fitted with a small brass lock. She had not opened it in 7 months. She had not dusted it either. Dust had settled on the lock in a gray ring, and the ring today looked to her like a small clock face that had stopped the day Elias died. She stood looking at the drawer a long time. She did not open it, not yet. Out behind the barn, in the round corral that Elias had built himself, the black stallion Kingfisher moved in his slow, searching circle. 17 hands almost black, but for the single white star at the broad of his forehead, and a body that seemed always to be listening even when it stood still. He had been foaled in the spring of '78 on a small stud farm in southern Idaho, and when Elias had brought him home as a colt on a long tether behind the wagon, he had put Bronwyn's hand on the colt's muzzle before he had put his own. She had been the first smell the foal knew. That was not accident. That was by design, the whole of it. The cloth in her left breast pocket smelled of dried clover and ewe oil. It smelled of it always. She had kept a small brown bottle of the oil in the pantry for 5 years, and had anointed the cloth each Sunday after chapel, the way another woman might have oiled a hymnal. The cloth was how she came and went from the Stallion's corral without injury. It was more plainly how the Stallion knew her from the rest of the world. She went out now, the cloth tucked still at her collarbone, and she set her forearms on the top rail of the corral. Kingfisher stopped his circle and came. He put his great black nose against her palm and blew warm breath into her skin. She said nothing. He did not need words. She said nothing for a reason. She had not spoken a single sentence aloud to another living creature, except to this horse and to her dead husband's photograph since the Saturday before. A voice she had come to believe was a thing you spent, and she did not yet know what she was saving hers for. The week moved the way weeks had moved since April. She rose before light. She carried water. She set pole traps for the coyotes that came down from the ridge after the goats. She mended the same fence on the creekside 3 times. because the deer kept knocking it over at the same bowed place, and once on Wednesday because someone on horseback, not a deer, had ridden the top rail down to look at her kitchen window from closer. She did not tell anyone about that. She walked out with a Winchester rifle in the crook of her arm at dusk, and she walked the fence line, and she did not see the rider, and she thought only good. Let him know I walk it. Thursday afternoon, a man on a gray gelding came down the creek path from the eastern side. She knew him by sight, though not by name. He rode like a man who had spent a great deal of time alone on a horse and had learned to let the animal do most of the thinking. He was lean. His hair was iron and gone to gray at the temples. He had a long scar running the line of his left jaw, pale as old rope. He rode with a roll of fence wire across his pommel and a claw hammer in his off-saddle scabbard. He stopped on his side of the creek, which was not her side, and he swung down. He did not call out. He pulled the hammer and he took a fistful of fresh staples from his coat, and he began without ceremony to rehang the section of her top wire she had been meaning to fix for 3 days. Bronwyn watched him a full minute before she crossed the water. "I did not ask for help, Mr. Crow. Thad Crow. I know you didn't ask. You'll ask or you won't. Meantime, your top wire is down and the deer know it. I've got staples and time." He did not look at her while he said it. He drove the staple. He said another. The hammer made a small, considered sound, not loud, not performing. She noticed that about him before she noticed anything else. He did not perform. She said, "You hold the wire wrong. Pull it higher." He paused. He looked at her. She felt him measure her not as a man measures a woman, but as a man measures a thing he has until now been wrong about. He said, "You're right. My shoulder gives when I pull low. I got lazy." He moved his grip. He drove the next staple higher. The wire rang taut. She stood a moment longer at the water's edge. The creek ran narrow between them, 2 feet wide, no more, and she did not cross it. She said, "Thank you, Mr. Crow," and she turned back. She was almost to the barn when she heard him speak again. Quiet, but carrying the way a certain kind of man can throw his voice without raising it. "I knew your husband, ma'am." She stopped. She did not turn. She stood a long time with her back to him. When she did turn finally to say when, where, how, he was already mounted again and his gelding was already moving up the creek path. And he lifted 2 fingers off the brim of his hat without looking back. She watched him go until he was only a shape between the cottonwoods. Then she walked slowly back to the house and she stood a while beside the writing desk with the locked drawer, and she still did not open it. Saturday came with low cloud and no wind, the kind of afternoon in which sound carries further than it ought. By 11 o'clock, the riders were coming up the valley road 3 abreast, and by noon there were 40 horses tied at her fence and 30 more men standing in her yard. And Silas Brockway had not shown himself. But his foreman, Rook Delaney, was there at the front of the press, one thumb hooked in his gun belt, the other hand rolling a cigarette that he did not in the end smoke. 2 men tried Kingfisher that afternoon. The first was Rook himself. The second was a kid from the Anderson outfit named Crane, who had a reputation down at the stockyards in Cheyenne for breaking mustangs in under a minute. Rook lasted 9 seconds in the saddle. Crane lasted 6. The crowd made the sounds. Crowds make low and bright like a creek over gravel and money changed hands. And Bronwyn stood at the edge of the corral with her hands folded at her waist and said nothing. Way at the back of the crowd, half behind the pole barn corner, a thin boy of perhaps 19 stood with his hat in both hands. His hair was dark and fine, his face unshaven in the way of a boy who could not yet grow a proper beard. He did not laugh when the men laughed. He did not bet. When Crane got up out of the dust, bleeding at the mouth, the boy turned his face away as though embarrassed on the man's behalf. Bronwyn marked him. She had marked him 2 Saturdays running now. He did not belong to this crowd. He stood in it because someone made him stand in it. She could see that in the way his shoulders were set against the back rail. Not easy, not proud, not here for the show. And up on the ridge road where the cottonwoods fell away and the long grass began, a single rider sat a gray horse and did not come down. Thad Crow watching. When the crowd broke up toward dusk and the last wagon rattled down the road, Bronwyn did not go inside. She stood at the corral rail until the dust had settled, and Kingfisher had drunk and had come to stand in the far corner, flanks still heaving, sweat drying black on his shoulders. She murmured in Welsh to him across the rails. She did not cross into him. He had had enough of being touched by people today. She felt then the weight of being looked at, and she turned. The thin boy was still there. Everyone else was gone. He stood at the far end of the yard, hat in both hands, and when she turned, he flinched as though he had expected her to throw something at him, and did not blame her if she did. She waited. He came forward in 3 awkward strides and stopped at what he seemed to have decided was a proper, respectful distance. "Ma'am," he said. He swallowed. "My name is Micah Ford. I work for the Diamond Bee." He paused. "I'm the boy that brings the sacks of oats up to the fence line on Tuesdays. I don't know if you—" "I know the face," she said. She had not meant to speak. Her voice came out cracked from disuse, and she cleared her throat. "Go on." He held out a folded scrap of paper. His hand was shaking. She took it. She opened it. It said in a boy's careful hand that had been labored over many times, "I hear you was a teacher before. I have $10. I want to learn my letters. Please don't tell no one." She read it twice. She read it a third time. She folded it and handed it back to him. "You wrote this yourself?" "Yes, ma'am." "It's not bad writing for a boy who can't read." He flushed to the roots of his hair. She said, "Come back Thursday after dark. Bring a candle. Go around the back of the house, not the front. I do not want Mr. Brockway to see you on my road. Ma'am, Thursday, Mr. Ford. Bring the candle. I do not want $10. He stood there with his mouth half open. Then he nodded once hard, as though she had given him an order in battle. He set his hat on his head, and he walked backward 3 steps, before he remembered himself and turned and went at a near run down the valley road. She watched him go until he was only a black stroke against the low gray light. She did not smile. But something inside her chest, a thing that had been held in a tight fist for 7 months, opened a finger. That night she lit the lamp in the kitchen and sat down at the writing desk. And this time she did open the drawer. She had the key for it. The key had been in her husband's Bible, tucked into the binding between 2 Corinthians and Galatians for 7 months. She had known it was there. She had not wanted before tonight to find what it opened. Inside the drawer, a leather folio. Inside the folio, a stack of letters. They were not, as she had half feared, letters from another woman. They were letters written by her husband to her, in his own square, careful hand, dated one by one from the spring of '82, the month they had married, through to October of '86, the month before his death. None of them had ever been sent. They had all been addressed to her in the house in which she already lived. She sat a long time with the stack on her knee. She picked up the top letter. The date was the 14th of October, 1886, 4 weeks before he had died. She unfolded it. Her husband's voice came up off the page as surely as if he had leaned across the desk and spoken into her ear. "My dear Bronwyn, I am writing these down in case a horse or a winter or a fool with a gun takes me, before I can say the half of what I mean to say to you. You have been for nearly 5 years now, the single good decision of my life. I did not expect love at 38. I did not expect a wife from Liverpool. I did not expect to learn from a woman half my size, who would not weep in front of me, how a man is supposed to stand in his own house. You taught me. I hope I taught you something back. There is a matter I have not told you. I have been these past 3 years searching by letter for your sister. I found her. She is alive. She is in Medicine Hat in the Saskatchewan country of Canada, working as a nurse in a small hospital there. I have written to her. She has written me back. I have not yet told you, because I wanted to be sure when I brought her to you that she was still the girl you remember, and that the bringing of her would not hurt you further. I needed first to know who she had become. If you are reading this, it means I did not live to finish that errand. I am sorry. It is the one task I would not have let go of had I been given the say of it. If when you are ready you wish to find her, the letters between her and me are in the bottom of this drawer. Her address is on the last of them. She does not yet know you are reading this. It is now for you to tell her. And one thing more, because it too belongs in this drawer. There is a man named Brockway in our valley. He is not, I believe, any direct kin of the man who ruined your father in Liverpool. But he is the brother of that man's wife, which, in my reading of such things, is kin enough. He has more than once inquired into our land. I have never told him you came from Liverpool. Do not tell him either. If any Brockway ever comes to this door about the property, do not sell, not for any price. I have reasons I have not yet written down. I will write them down next Sunday. There is no next Sunday for me, it seems. I am sorry, my dear. You deserve the whole of the telling. Your husband who loved you, Elias. She did not cry. She read the letter twice. Then she folded it very carefully along the lines he had made, and she placed it back at the top of the stack. She sat in the lamp's yellow circle and she looked at nothing for a long time. Then she said aloud in Welsh, because Welsh was the only language she trusted in that moment. What did you know, my heart, that you did not have time to set down? The lamp answered nothing. The house answered nothing. Somewhere in the dark of the yard, Kingfisher shifted against a rail and blew a long breath out through his nose. Sunday was a quiet day. She did not go to chapel. She had not gone to chapel since Elias died. She walked instead up the low hill behind the house to the place where her husband was buried. A plain granite marker the mason in Cheyenne had cut, with only his name and his dates. She brought no flowers. She brought nothing. She stood beside it, her hands at her sides. "I have read them," she said in English this time, because English was the language in which her husband had loved her. "I will not sell. You did not have to write the reasons, Elias. I do not need the reasons." The wind moved the grass. She came down the hill. On the way, she passed through the small pasture where the 2 milk goats were staked, and she put her hand on the pole of each stake as she went, as she always did, the way a woman in a lit corridor will touch each wall. Sconce as she passes, not because she needs the wall, but because the wall is hers. Monday evening brought a rider up her road she had not expected. Silas Brockway came alone. He came without gun belt. He came without hat. He rode his paint horse up to her hitching ring as though he were a deacon paying call. And he swung down slow. And he set the reins over the iron, and he looked at the house before he looked at her. She was on the porch with the Winchester across her lap. She had seen him coming from a mile. "Mrs. Holloway, Mr. Brockway, I have come," he said, "alone and sober and without cause to fear me to make an offer. The last time you came without cause to fear, you 3 men beat me in my own yard." He flinched. The flinch was small, but it was real. She marked it. "That was a poor night's business, ma'am. It has cost me more than I counted. I have come to make it right." "You have not come to make it right, Mr. Brockway. You have come to make it finished. There is a difference." He let a breath out. He put his hands on his hips, the way a man does who wishes a woman would let him have his prepared speech. $3,000, Mrs. Holloway. Cash. Today. For the deed. And a first-class berth on the Union Pacific through to New York and passage on the Cunard line back to Liverpool. You may leave with your trunks and your mule and your horse if you can keep him saddled. I will ask no questions, and I will see you to the county line myself. I am not going back to Liverpool. Ma'am, Mrs. Holloway, let us be plain. You do not belong in this valley. You have not belonged in this valley since your husband died. You are a woman without kin, without income, without Mr. Brockway." Something in her voice stopped him. She rose from the porch chair. She set the Winchester gently against the rail. She crossed to the top step, and there she stopped, and she looked down at him from the single step's height. And she spoke in the voice she had used once in another life to quiet a room of English school children. "I knew a man once," she said, "in Liverpool in the winter of '79 who bore your family name. He was called Dirk Brockway. He ruined my father. My father died in a debtor's cell the winter after. You are his nephew, Mr. Brockway. I have made certain of it. I have had these 3 years the leisure to make certain." The blood went out of Silas Brockway's face from the collar up. "That is a lie, Mrs. Holloway. It is not a lie. Your uncle sailed for New York on the Parthia on the 2nd of February, 1882. He took a cabin in 2nd class under the name Derek Brock, which was cheap of him. He did not reach New York. He died of typhus on the 9th day out and was buried at sea on the 10th. I did not know his name until after I had come to Wyoming. I did not know your name was Brockway until I had been 4 months a widow." He stared at her. "You did not come to this valley by accident, Mr. Brockway. I do not know what you came for. I do not know if you yourself know what you came for. But I will tell you this, and I will tell it to you once, and I will not tell it to you again. I am not going back to Liverpool, and I am not going to Cheyenne, and I am not selling you 1 square foot of my husband's ground. Not for 3,000, not for 30,000. Not if you bring me my sister on the end of a rope." She saw the moment the word sister left her mouth that she had given him something. She had not meant to. She saw his eye move. She went on as if she had not seen it. "Now take your horse off my property. I have shot a coyote off this porch, and I will shoot a man off it. The difference to me is 4 inches of trigger pull." He stood a moment. He worked his jaw. Then he said quietly, almost to himself, "Saturday, Mrs. Holloway, I am bringing a man up from Montana. His name is Josiah Merrick. He has not failed in 9 years of the work to put a saddle on a horse. When he puts the saddle on your stallion, the thing between us will be decided. Not by a judge, not by a sheriff, by the horse. I have heard men say that before, Mr. Brockway. You have not heard this man say it." He mounted. He did not lift his hat because he did not have one. At the turn of the road, he looked back once, and she saw in his face a thing that was not anger and was not scheming, but was more simply a kind of fear. He had come to bully her, and he was leaving frightened. She did not know yet what he was frightened of, but she marked it as she marked everything, and she went inside. She did not sleep that night. She sat at the writing desk with the lamp low, and she turned over one by one the things she had been given in these last 3 days. The boy Micah with his $10 in his paper. The man Thad Crow who had known her husband and had not yet said how. The stack of letters with her sister's address in them alive in Canada. And now Silas Brockway, who had come with an offer and had left white at the mouth. Too many threads, and all of them moving at once, and the Saturday bearing down like a weather out of the north. She opened her leather book. She uncapped her ink. She wrote in her small, careful hand, 119. Josiah Merrick. Saturday. No cause for alarm. She looked at the words. She underlined the last 4. She did it slowly. No cause for alarm. She put the cap back on the ink. She trimmed the wick. She was crossing the yard to the barn for the last round of the night, the lantern swinging low beside her knee, when a stone turned under her boot, and she stopped instinctive to look back at the house. The house sat dark against the dark. The kitchen lamp was out. The bedroom lamp was out. The stars were thin, high cold. A single cottonwood creaked down by the creek. She lifted the lantern and she looked at the house the way a stranger might for the first time. The long, plain porch her husband had laid. The low roofline. The 2 upstairs windows dark as closed eyes. 5 years of a life built by a man who had died kneeling beside a fence post. 480 acres of creek ground and grass ground and pine shadow. I will not sell, she had told him in the hill graveyard, without flowers. She set the lantern down on the step. She set it down carefully because the oil was low. Then she walked out along the fence line, not into the barn, and she went the full half-mile of the eastern property, the Winchester in the crook of her arm, the clover and yew scent in her collar, and at the far corner post where the wire ran up to meet the gate. She stopped, and she rested her hand on the top rail. The rail was cool. It had been set by Elias in the summer of '82, the first full month she had lived here as his wife. She had brought him water in a tin pail that afternoon. She remembered the angle of his shoulders as he set the post. She remembered the way he had not thanked her for the water. He had only looked up and grinned as though grinning was the whole of the conversation. She stood at the corner post a long time. On the ridge opposite, across the creek, a single dark shape moved against the stars, and then went still. A horse at a standstill and a man on its back watching her yard. She did not lift the rifle. She did not move. She did not speak. She lifted her free hand instead, and she gave the nod, the same small nod she had given Silas Brockway on the road 4 days before. But this one was different. This one said, "I see you, Mr. Crow. I do not yet know what you are doing on that ridge. When I know, we will speak. Until then, keep your watch if you must." The shape on the ridge, after a moment, gave the nod back and did not move. She walked back toward the house along her own fence line in the dark, the lantern left behind on the step. The stars thin overhead, the mule calling once in his stall and then falling quiet. At the porch she bent and took up the lantern and she blew it out. Inside she climbed the stair. She did not undress. She lay down in her clothes on top of the quilt her husband had bought her the Christmas of '84, and she closed her eyes. Out beyond the house in his corral, the black stallion kingfisher lifted his head once, scented the wind, and then lowered it again to graze. Somewhere up the ridge, a man in a long coat sat his gelding and waited for the dawn, and did not come down. And somewhere far to the north, beyond the Canadian border, in a narrow room above a small river town hospital, a young woman named Neris Ashcombe turned in her sleep and did not know yet that her sister was alive and had begun at last to read her husband's letters. The first thread had been pulled. All the rest would follow. Part 2. The man who paid the saddle and the boy who paid himself. Tuesday came pale and hot. The sky bleached white at the rim, the cottonwoods dry enough to rattle. Bronwyn rose before first light, and she did what she had always done, which was the work. She set the milk to souring in the stone crock. She carried 2 pails of water from the pump to the vegetable rows Elias had laid out 5 Aprils ago. She split kindling. She walked the east fence, once looked at the tracks in the dust, and saw that the rider on the ridge had been gone since perhaps 2 hours after midnight. The gelding's prints went north, the way Thad Crow's gelding always went north up the creek path toward the small lot he had bought on the far side the lot. He had bought, she now suspected, for no reason at all except to be within a mile of her barn. At 7 she opened the ledger, and she wrote in her small hand, "No cause for alarm." She was aware as she wrote it of repeating herself. She was aware that repetition in a ledger kept by a woman alone was the beginning of a prayer. She closed the book. Wednesday was the day the letter came, or more precisely, it was the day Thad Crow told her the letter had been waiting 7 months, and that no one had thought to tell her. He came up the road on foot. She saw him before he saw her, which was new. He was carrying his hat in one hand and a folded newspaper under one arm, and his gelding was nowhere in sight. He came to the porch and he stopped at the foot of the steps, which was proper, and he waited until she looked up from the churn. "Mrs. Holloway." "Mr. Crow. I was in Cheyenne yesterday for a load of oats. I stepped into the telegraph office to send a wire. There is a notice board there for general delivery." "Yes." "There is a bundle of letters on that board under your name that has been sitting since late November. The postmaster is a Dane named Olson. He does not, as a rule, ride out to the valley. He is waiting for you to come." She set down the churn paddle, slowly. "Under my name." "Under Holloway, ma'am. The bundle is 6 or 7 envelopes. The top one is a woman's hand foreign post. I did not read the address. I did not think it was mine to read." He paused. "I would have told you sooner. I did not know till yesterday that you had not been in to Cheyenne since your husband died." She looked at him a long moment. "How did you know," she said, "to look on that board for my name?" Thad Crow was quiet. He turned the brim of his hat between his fingers. "Because your husband told me years ago that if a thing ever happened to him, the letters that mattered would be on the Cheyenne board general delivery under his surname, and that someone ought to go and collect them and put them in your hand." "He told you this?" "He told me this in the winter of '77, ma'am, in a cave in the Dakota country, when we did not know either of us would walk out of that storm. I did not remember it until the 2nd week of this April. By then you had been beaten in your yard, and you had closed your door against the whole county, and I was not the man yet to come ring it." She did not speak for a while. "You will drive me into Cheyenne," she said at last, "tomorrow at first light, if you are willing." "I am willing. I will pay for the oats on your wagon and the use of your team and the day's wage for your time." "You will not, ma'am." "Mr. Crow." "You will not." He set his hat on his head. He set it flat and without heat. "I owe a man a thing. I am going to pay the whole of it, and I am not going to let you pay any part of it for me. That is the whole of my position. Good day, Mrs. Holloway. 4 o'clock tomorrow, the road below your gate." He walked back down the yard with the same unhurried stride she had watched cross her creek on Thursday. At the gate, he turned once. "The top envelope, ma'am," he said, "the one in the woman's hand. It had a red Canadian stamp on the corner." He went. She stood with her hand on the churn a long time after he had gone, and she did not move it until her fingers ached. They drove in the dark. They did not speak much. The road to Cheyenne from Black Fork Ridge was 31 miles, and the wagon-loaded light took them the better part of 6 hours. He had brought a wool blanket for her knees because the dawn air, this high and this dry, came off the Laramie Range with a knife in it. She did not thank him for the blanket in words. She spread it, she folded the corner neatly over her lap, and he saw her do it, and that was enough between them. Somewhere past the foothills with the first sun on the road, he said, "I was married once." She did not turn her head. Her name was Adelaide Foss. She died of a hemorrhage in her bed in the winter of '71, in a sod house outside of Grand Island, Nebraska, the same night our daughter was born. The daughter lived 4 hours. I was holding both of them when the second one went. That is the whole of that. The road went on. Bronwyn was quiet. After a while she said, "Thank you for the telling, Mr. Crow. You did not ask." "No, but you needed to set it down somewhere today for a reason of your own." "I will not ask the reason." He nodded, looking at the mule team's ears. They rode on in a quiet that was no longer the earlier quiet. It was a quiet that knew one more thing than it had known an hour ago. Mr. Olson, the postmaster, was a small, bald, anxious man with a German accent he persistently called Danish. He fetched the bundle from a pigeonhole with Elias Holloway's name written above it in pencil. He apologized in a rapid stammer 3 times. While he untied the string, he offered her coffee. She took the coffee. She did not drink it. She sat at the oak bench by the window, and she opened the envelopes in the order of their dates. There were 7 letters. 5 were from Neris. 1 was from a firm of Liverpool solicitors dated March of '86, concerning a small residual sum from the sale of the Toxteth lodgings where their father had last lived. £61 sterling held in her name, and could she please advise disposition? 1 was from a woman in Manchester, who had been a childhood friend of Bronwyn's mother, and who had written in good faith to a name last known to her 25 years before. It was the Neris letters that she read. She read the earliest first. It was dated September of '83. Dear Mr. Holloway, I thank you for your letter which found me in good health. You write that you are the husband of my sister Bronwyn. Forgive me if I do not at once accept this news. My sister disappeared from Liverpool in the spring of 1882, and I had by the following winter come to believe her dead. If you are indeed her husband, I beg you to describe for me in your next the mark upon her left shoulder, the town in Wales where our grandmother lived, and the name of the small dog our father kept the year before he died. When I have these 3 things, I will believe you, and I will write as a sister. Yours in cautious hope, in Ashcombe, medicine, hat. She read it twice. The paper trembled once, and she set it flat upon her knee and laid her palm upon it, and it did not tremble again. The next letter, dated 2 months later, began, Dear Elias, forgive me my suspicion of September. Your description of the mark and of the cottage in Llangefni and of the little spaniel that was named for our grandmother's hymn was enough, and more than enough. I am writing to you now as a sister writes to a brother. I did not want in those first years to be found. I was afraid for reasons I will set down in a later letter when I have the strength for them. I am past those reasons now. Tell me of my Bronwyn. Tell me everything. And tell her nothing yet until I have asked you at least 1 question more. The question in the next letter had been this: Is she well? I mean by the word well what a sister means by it, not what a husband means by it. Does she sleep through a night? Does she smile where no one is watching? Does she sing still the old Welsh airs? If she does, I will come. If she does not, I will come also. But I will come differently. And I will bring with me a thing I have made for her. And I will not show her the thing unless the thing is needed. The 4th letter from the spring of '85 said, I believe now that I am ready to come. My work here would release me in the autumn of the following year. If it is convenient, let us plan for the November of '86. The 5th letter from October of '86 said, I am ready. I have the ticket. Send word when. That letter had been waiting on the board at Cheyenne. It had been waiting because Elias Holloway, the man who was to have sent word, had died on the 14th of November and had not yet made the trip into town to send the telegram. And no one had known to look for the board. and no one had written to Medicine Hat to say he has died. He is not coming. The plan is not the plan anymore. Bronwyn put the 5 letters down in her lap. She folded her hands on top of them. She did not cry. Not there. Not in front of Mr. Olson, who kept glancing at her from behind the counter with the bewildered sympathy of a small, bald man who has not in his life known what to do with the grief of a woman. She put the letters back into their envelopes. She tied the string. She thanked Mr. Olson in a voice that she kept deliberately low and ordinary, and she asked him before she left for a sheet of post paper and an envelope and a stamp for Canada. She wrote, standing at the counter, 4 lines. She wrote them in the Welsh their grandmother had taught them both, because Nerys would know from the 4 lines alone in that tongue that the hand on the page was hers. Fi chwaer anwyl, your wife yin few, I me Elias wedi maro, is griffen vosh ataf, Bronwyn, my dear sister, I am alive. Elias is dead. Write to me. She sealed it. She paid for the stamp. She went out into the afternoon sun of Cheyenne with her 7 envelopes pressed against her breast inside her coat, and she sat up on the wagon bench beside Thad Crow, and she said quietly, "Take me home, Mr. Crow." And he did. On the ride back, she read none of the letters again. She did not speak of them. Thad Crow did not ask. The team went at a walk up the grade past Horse Creek. The sun came low and red across their left shoulders. At one point, somewhere past the last of the Laramie foothills, she said without turning her head, "Thank you for taking me to town, Mr. Crow." "Yes, ma'am." "Thank you for not asking." "Yes, ma'am." The wheels turned. She said later, almost to herself, "She is alive." "Yes, ma'am," he said again, because it was the only answer a decent man had to that sentence. And she was coming to understand a decent man. Thursday night, Micah Ford came the back way with a candle in his fist. He was almost an hour late. He was late because the moon had been too bright at 9 o'clock to cross the open ground behind the barn without throwing a shadow a half-mile long, and he had waited in a ditch below the road for the moon to drop behind the ridge. When he knocked at her kitchen door, his trousers were wet to the knee, and there was a smear of mud under his jaw, and his eyes, when she opened the door, were the eyes of a boy who believed she might have changed her mind and have a shotgun waiting for him. "Come in, Mr. Ford." He came in. He took off his hat. He held the candle in front of him like a relic. She sat him at the kitchen table. She did not light the candle. She lit instead the oil lamp, and she turned the wick down low, because low light is kinder to a boy who is ashamed to be seen. She laid in front of him the King James Bible that had been Elias's, and she turned it to the 23rd Psalm, which she had chosen because the 23rd Psalm is built like a kind staircase of 4-letter and 5-letter words in steady cadences, and a boy who can learn to read. Nothing else can usually learn to read it. He sat with his hands folded in his lap like a man at confession. "You have a piece of paper, Mr. Ford." "Yes, ma'am." "Fold it in half. Take the pencil. We are going to begin with only 4 letters. Your name, M-I-C-A-H. He wrote them slow. He got the A backward the first time. He looked up at her with the old fear of being struck. She took the pencil from him. She made a correct A beside his backward one. She said, "You will do it wrong many times before you do it right, Mr. Ford. That is the shape of the work." Again. He did it again. Right this time. Good. She said nothing else for 20 minutes. She let him copy and she let him stumble. And when he made the same error 3 times in a row, she did not tell him. She waited for him to hear it himself, because the ear she had learned was the best teacher. At 10:30, she closed the book and said, "Enough for tonight. You are tired. You came a long way. Before you go, I have a question." "Yes, ma'am." "Why do you want your letters, Mr. Ford? You are 19 years old. You could live a full life and not learn them. Many men have." He looked at his hands. He had washed them before he came. She saw where the dirt still sat in the thumbnails, and where he had tried to scrub it out and had not quite. "My mother died, ma'am, when I was 12. She had lung fever. She had run a roadhouse out on the Laramie Plain. She was never married. She never told me who my father was." He paused. He was speaking to the table. "When she died, the man who bought the roadhouse from her estate, a man named Purvis, gave me a letter she had left sealed in the bar box. It was from my father. It had his name on it, and the town he was living in, which was Chicago. I could not read it. Mr. Purvis could not read it either, or so he said. I put it in my saddlebag. I have carried it in my saddlebag for 7 years. I want to read it before I die, ma'am. That is all. I do not want Mr. Purvis or anybody at the Diamond Bee or anybody at the Anderson outfit to read it for me. I want to read it." She did not speak for a moment. "Bring the letter next Thursday, Mr. Ford. Do not bring it yet. You will be ready for it when you are ready. I will tell you when." "Yes, ma'am." He stood. He put on his hat. At the door he turned. "Mrs. Holloway." "Yes." "You have no reason to do this for me. You have every reason not to. I stood in that crowd once, in April, the night Mr. Brockway and them done what they done to you. I was 16 feet from your gatepost, and I stood there, and I did not move, and I did not say a word. I was afraid. I have been afraid since I was 12 years old. I would like one day to not be. I do not know if a man earns that, or if it is given. I thought I would say it to you before you taught me any more of my letters, in case when you heard it, you would not want to." She stood very still. She did not answer him at once. She could not at once. She felt at the base of her throat the old hard knot rise, the knot that had been there every week since April, the knot that she had fed in the private of her own mind with the thought of each face in that crowd. She looked at the boy in her kitchen doorway. He was waiting. He had come to this house tonight, knowing he would say this before he left it. He had walked an hour through wet grass in the dark to say it, and he had said it, and now he was waiting to be struck. She said slowly, "Go home, Mr. Ford. Come back next Thursday. Bring the candle." He bowed his head. He went. She closed the door. She slid the bolt. She stood in her kitchen a long time with one hand on the doorframe. Then she sat down at the table and she wept for the first time since November. Not for her husband and not for her sister, but for a 19-year-old boy who had stood 16 feet from her gatepost and had been too afraid to move, and who 7 years from now would not be, because he had come through the back way tonight with a candle in his fist. Saturday came. She had known since Monday evening what Saturday would bring. Silas Brockway had brought it in the words Josiah Merrick, and he had brought it in the whiteness of his own jaw when she had spoken the name Dirk. By 11:70, horses stood tied along her fence. By noon, her yard held 100 men and a few women. The first women she had seen in the crowd in 4 months, and she understood when she saw them that the valley had begun to treat her Saturday the way a valley treats a hanging, which is to say, something the children should not miss. At 12:15, a single rider came up the valley road at an easy gait on a handsome Appaloosa mare, the exact color of a thundercloud at dusk. He was perhaps 35. He was clean-shaven. He wore a short, dark coat cut Montana-style close in the shoulder, and a black, flat-brimmed hat with no band. He carried no rope. He carried no whip. He rode into her yard without a word, and he dismounted in a single fluid motion that drew from the men at the rail the low, involuntary grunt a crowd makes when it has seen something done correctly. Josiah Merrick, trap. He did not tip his hat to her. He did not acknowledge her at all. That was, she understood, part of the work. He was here to ride a horse. He was not here to greet a widow. He walked to the corral. He stopped at the rail. He put both forearms on the rail the way she herself did, and he looked at Kingfisher for 1 full minute without moving. Kingfisher looked back. Then Trap Merrick reached slowly into his coat and brought out a folded square of cloth, and he unfolded it, and he held it level with his own chest, so that the stallion across 20 feet of open corral dust might smell it on the air. Bronwyn on the porch drew a breath. The cloth in Trap Merrick's hand had been steeped in something. She could not from the porch identify the something, but the horse could. The horse's nostrils flared once, twice, and the great black head came up, and the ears pricked hard forward. Trap Merrick said, still without turning, "Open the gate for me, please." Rook Delaney, who had been waiting at the gate, opened it. Trap Merrick walked in. He held the cloth at his chest. He did not hurry. He stopped perhaps 15 feet from the stallion, and he stood there, the cloth held level, and he said nothing at all for a long count. The horse took a step forward. A low sound went up from the crowd. Not a cheer. A thing more private than that the sound 100 men make when they are watching a thing they had thought impossible begin to happen. Bronwyn's hand closed on the porch rail. She did not loosen it. Trap Merrick did not move. He let the horse come to him. The horse came step by step. Neck lowered the curiosity on him stronger for the moment than the fear. At 6 feet, the stallion stopped. He stretched his nose forward. He took the scent off the cloth. Trap Merrick spoke quietly once in a language that was not English. Then he did a thing Bronwyn had not expected, and which she had not on any Saturday before this seen any rider do. He went down on one knee. He lowered the cloth to the dust. He left it there, and he backed 3 steps away from it without turning his back. Kingfisher came the last of the distance slow and put his muzzle to the cloth and stood breathing over it. Trap Merrick, on his feet again, took a plain rope halter from his belt. Not a bridle, not a bit a halter. And he walked in smooth as a man walks in a dark room he has known all his life. And he slipped the halter over the stallion's ears from the offside, which was not the standard way, which was the way her husband had done it. which was the way Mrs. Aoife Gallagher had taught her on a boat from Liverpool in 1882. Bronwyn's grip on the rail did not loosen. It tightened. This man knew. This man knew the work. Where had he learned it? Trap Merrick walked the haltered stallion in a slow, tight circle. He spoke to him in the language that was not English. The crowd was very quiet now. The bets had stopped. No one was calling odds. Everyone now was simply watching. Trap Merrick stopped. He put a hand flat on the stallion's shoulder. He stood there a long moment, letting the horse feel the weight of the hand. Then, from his saddlebag, which Rook had brought to the gate, he took a plain light saddle pad and a plain light stock saddle, and he laid the pad on the horse, and the stallion shuddered once along the withers, but did not move. And he laid the saddle on, and he drew the girth, and the stallion's ear flicked once and held. A man at the rail whispered, "My God." Trap Merrick swung up. The stallion stood. The stallion took one step. The stallion took another step. Trap Merrick walked him slow around the perimeter of the corral. He did it once. He did it twice. On the third turn, he let the animal into a trot. And the trot was clean, and the horse's ears were forward, and the crowd, hardly daring, began to make the low hum that precedes a cheer. And Bronwyn on the porch closed her eyes. Only for a second. No one saw. When she opened them, she was ready. She stepped down off the porch. She walked to the corral rail. She did not cross in. She stood at the gate, and she said, not loud, but clearly the way a schoolmistress calls a classroom to order, "Mr. Merrick, a question, if you please." Trap Merrick drew the horse down to a walk. He looked at her across the corral, and she saw for the first time his eyes. They were pale gray, and there was nothing in them that was cruel. "Ma'am, where did you learn the cloth?" He did not answer at once. "From an old woman," he said at last, "in Kentucky, 20 years ago. I was a boy. Her name, Mr. Merrick." He looked at her. He said, "Gallagher." Bronwyn's hand, without her permission, lifted an inch off the rail. "Aoife Gallagher," she said. That was the woman. They looked at each other across 20 feet of corral dust, and she saw working across his clean-shaven face the slow understanding that the widow on the porch was not a stranger to this trade, that she knew the woman he had named, that she knew almost certainly what was under his cloth. He was quiet a moment. Then he said courteously, the way a good man says a hard thing, "Mrs. Holloway, I do not wish to take anything from you that Mrs. Gallagher taught first. If you will tell me the horse is yours in the proper sense, I will get down and I will walk out, and Mr. Brockway will have to find some other trouble to make." A sound went through the crowd. Rook Delaney's head snapped round. Silas Brockway was not there. She had not seen him in the crowd all morning. She saw now the reason. Bronwyn looked up at Josiah Merrick. She looked at him a long time. Then she said gently, "The horse was imprinted on my husband when he was a foal, Mr. Merrick. He was imprinted on him by the same method Mrs. Gallagher taught me on a ship in the spring of '82. My husband has been dead 7 months. The horse is mine in the proper sense only in that I am the second scent he knew, and the only one left alive. He will not carry me. He will not, by anything I know of the work, carry any other living man. He is carrying me now, ma'am." "Yes," she said. And I have been watching that with my heart in my throat for 3 full minutes, because I have never in 5 years seen him carry anyone but Elias, and I do not understand it. I will be honest with you. I do not understand what I am looking at. Trap Merrick sat the horse a long moment. Then he said, "I brought the cloth from Lexington, ma'am. Your Mrs. Gallagher made the recipe. She made the same recipe for many of us. We carry it all our lives. It works on any horse raised on it, not only on the horse it was first made for. Your husband likely bought his recipe from the same woman." "He did." "Then the horse recognizes the maker, ma'am, not the man. There is no witchcraft here. There is only the old woman in 2 places working twice." Bronwyn stood very still. She had lived 5 years believing that the imprint was a private thing between Elias and the horse, and that she was the keeper of the 1 second door. She had built her Saturday on that belief. She had built her last 4 months on it. She had built it on a thing that was true, but it was not the whole truth. The whole truth was that any rider who had been made by Aoife Gallagher in Kentucky carried in the lining of his own coat the key she had thought was hers alone. She looked up at Trap Merrick and she said very quietly, "Mr. Merrick, will you get down from my husband's horse?" He did not hesitate. He dismounted. He unsaddled. He set the saddle on the rail. He slipped the halter off the stallion's ears. He picked up the cloth from the dust, folded it, and put it back into his coat. He walked out of the corral. He closed the gate behind him. He walked to his Appaloosa mare he mounted, and he turned the mare's head back down the valley road the way he had come. At the gate of the yard, he drew rein. He looked back at Bronwyn. "Mrs. Holloway, Mr. Merrick, I was paid $200 by Mr. Brockway to ride that horse today. I am going to ride to the Diamond B, and I am going to give him his $200 back, and I am going to tell him in language he will understand that I will not be available for his business again. I do not know what you are to him, ma'am, or him to you, but I know a little now of what you are to this horse, and that is enough for me." He touched his hat. He rode out. The crowd did not stay. It is a curious thing about a crowd that has come to see a hanging that does not happen. It does not cheer, and it does not boo, and it does not argue. It simply quietly reaches for its own reins, and it loads its wagons, and it drifts away down the road. And by 2 in the afternoon her yard was empty, but for the dust and the fresh tracks, and one dark pool of tobacco, spit drying on the step. She did not move from the rail for a long time. Rook Delaney had left with the rest. Thad Crow had not come in all day. She realized this only now. He had not, for the first Saturday in weeks, sat on the ridge. She did not know where he had been, and she did not at that moment have the strength to wonder. She turned to go into the house, and at the porch step she saw that someone had left, propped against the door, a small folded square of cloth. She bent. She picked it up. She did not unfold it yet. She carried it inside. At the kitchen table she unfolded it. It was cloth of the same weave as Trap Merrick's. It smelled of dried clover and yew oil. And one thing more, a thin green note she did not immediately place, and then placed and sat down hard in the chair when she placed it. Bog Myrtle, the Irish edition. A thing Aoife Gallagher had mentioned on the ship only once as the piece we use when we mean to say goodbye to a horse at the end. Trap Merrick had left her the cloth. He had left her in the cloth one more thing Mrs. Aoife Gallagher had known, and which Bronwyn and Elias in their young hurry had not yet learned. She sat with the cloth in her hand, and after a while, without deciding to, she walked out to the corral. Kingfisher came to the rail. She held the cloth out to him across the rail in her open palm. He took the scent off it. He blew. He rested his great black forehead against hers through the rail the way he had done in April and May, and every month since, and he stood like that a long while. And she, for the first time since Elias had died, laid her own palm along the white star on his forehead, and she said aloud in English in her husband's language, "Good horse, good brave horse, he is not here. He is not coming. I am here. You are mine. I am yours." That is from this day the whole of the arrangement. The horse blew once. She stood with her forehead against his another minute, and then she stepped back and she walked back to the house, and the cloth she did not keep at her collarbone. The cloth she laid instead on top of Elias's Bible in the kitchen, and she left it there folded open as a kind of flag or a kind of letter or a kind of promise not yet fully read. Sunday was the morning of the scones. She had not planned it. She had meant to rise and walk the east fence and count the new tracks. She rose and she stood in the kitchen a while, and she found herself without deciding to taking down the flour and the buttermilk and the small stone crock of currants that had been in the pantry since Christmas. She made scones. Welsh scones the way her grandmother had made them in Anglesey 40 years ago. The way she had not made them since Elias died. She made too many. There were 16 on the baking stone when she was finished. And 16 was the number for a full house, which she did not have. At 10 o'clock, as if she had sent for him, Thad Crow came up her road on foot, his hat in his hand. A half hour later, Micah Ford came up the back way the wrong way with a string of 3 cottontail rabbits he had shot at dawn, because he had not. He said known what a man brings when a woman has invited him for a Sunday meal. And his mother had once said, "You brought meat." She did not correct him. She set a third plate. They ate at the kitchen table. She had laid out the scones on the blue willowware that had been the one good plate her mother had carried from Anglesey to Liverpool in 1852. She had laid out the last of the churn butter and the small pot of gooseberry preserve that had been Elias's favorite. Thad Crow ate 3 scones and was quiet. Micah Ford ate 5 and tried twice to say thank you and could not finish either sentence. The kitchen was warm. The lamp was not lit. The morning came in yellow through the east window, and there was for perhaps 40 minutes no trouble in the world at all. At one point, Thad said, looking into his coffee, "I have a son." Bronwyn looked up. "He is 17 now. He is in Montana. His mother was a woman I was with in the winter of '69 after Adelaide. I did not marry her. I should have. I was a coward about it. She married another man. That man has raised the boy as his own. The boy knows or has been told who the real father is. I have not gone to see him. I have not written. I have thought about it every month since he was born, and I have not done it." He did not look up while he said this. He was speaking to the coffee. Micah Ford, who was sitting across from him, looked down at his own plate. He did not ask a single question. He reached instead for another scone, and he put it on Thad Crow's plate, because Thad Crow had eaten his. Thad Crow did not say thank you. He said, "I will go one day. I do not know when." Bronwyn said, "When you are ready, Mr. Crow." "Yes, ma'am." And that was all that was said about it that Sunday. But she saw across the kitchen table the way Thad Crow's shoulders came down a half-inch, and she understood that he had been carrying the boy at the top of his chest for 17 years. And that today in her kitchen with the scones and the gooseberry and the small stack of dishes Micah Ford had insisted on washing, he had shifted the boy one notch lower in the pack, and that even a half-inch after 17 years was a thing. That evening, after the two of them had gone, she walked out behind the barn, and she stood a long time at the corral rail, and she watched the light leave the sky. She did not feel yet that she had won anything. She did not feel safe. Silas Brockway had not come today. Silas Brockway's silence was a new silence, and it was not the silence of a man giving up. It was the silence of a man regrouping. She thought of Rook Delaney's face when Trap Merrick had turned the mare around. She thought of the black-gloved woman she had seen once in the back of the crowd a week ago, a woman she did not know by name, but whose posture in that crowd had not been the posture of a wife along for the spectacle. She thought there is another hand in this. She did not yet know whose. She thought also Mr. Crow has a son. Mr. Ford has a letter. I have a sister. This house holds tonight 3 unfinished errands, and not one of them is the errand of the deed. She stood at the rail a long time. When she turned at last to go in, she saw against the last red of the sky on the western ridge the single shape of a rider sitting a horse, not Thad's gelding, a taller horse, a horse she did not know. The rider was not Thad Crow. She knew Thad Crow's silhouette now the way she knew her own gate latch. This was a woman. She was sitting side saddle. She sat a long moment. Then she turned the horse slowly and rode north along the ridge and was gone. Bronwyn stood in the yard alone. She said aloud in Welsh to no one, "Oh, it is you then." And she went inside and she slid the bolt and she laid Trap Merrick's cloth over Elias's Bible one more time. And she sat at the writing desk and she opened the leather book and she wrote in her small hand Saturday, "No rider." A second hand on the table. I do not yet know her face. Cause for care. She closed the book. She blew out the lamp. Upstairs she lay down in her clothes again on top of the quilt. And she did not this time sleep at all. And at 3 in the morning she was still awake and she was listening through the open window to the sound a black stallion makes in his corral when he is dreaming. And for the first time in 7 months, it did not sound to her like grief. It sounded now like a thing in her keeping. And somewhere to the south in a handsome parlor, in a house of painted cedar shingles, a woman in a black glove was writing also in her own careful hand a list. And at the top of the list she had written the word Holloway, and under it she had written in Latin a phrase that Bronwyn would not see and would not read for another full month. Aqua vitae sub terra. The water of life is beneath the ground. Part 3. 3 letters and a road north. The letter from Medicine Hat came on a Friday, the last Friday of August, carried up the valley road by a freight wagon driver who had taken it out of the Cheyenne board with a note from Mr. Olson pinned to the string. The note said only, "For Mrs. Holloway. Delivered urgent. Oh." The driver handed it down to her at her gate without dismounting, touched his hat, and drove on. She stood with it at her gate a long time. The envelope was thick. It was not the careful half-sheet Neris had written before. It was 5 sheets at least by the feel. Bronwyn carried it into the kitchen. She set it on the table. She did not open it at once. She went to the stove first and lifted the kettle and set it on to boil, because her grandmother had taught her that a letter from a person you love is read with tea, not without. And she meant to do her grandmother that one courtesy. When the tea was made, she sat at the table and she opened the envelope. Fie choir Anwyl, my dear sister, your 4 lines came to me on the evening of the 3rd, in my own hand again after 5.5 years, and I read them in the hallway outside the matron's office, and I did not make it to my own room before I had to sit down on the floor. I am writing to you now from that same hallway. It is 11 at night. I did not want to wait until the morning to begin. I was not dead. I was close to it. I will not set down here what the year after our father's burying was for me in Liverpool. You do not need it, and I do not wish to give it to you, because giving it to you is a kind of asking you to carry it, and you have carried enough. I will only say that I did not disappear on purpose. I disappeared because a man named Ainsworth, who had been a friend of our father's, came to me on the night after the funeral and offered me a position in Manchester in a household at 8 shillings a week. And I took the train north the next morning with the whole of my effects in a single hat box. The position was not what he had said it was. I left the household in the 2nd week. I will not set down what the position was. I slept in a public house for 2 nights. And on the 3rd, I met a Welshwoman of our grandmother's village by accident in a shop, and she took me in. Her name was Mrs. Ephens. She kept me through the winter. In the spring of '82, she sold her interest in the shop, and she and I went together to Liverpool docks, and we took passage on a ship to Halifax. She is buried now in a Mennonite cemetery in the prairies outside Medicine Hat. She left me the small sum she had. That sum put me through the 2-year course in nursing at the hospital here, and I have been working on the ward ever since. And I have lived above the hospital in a room of my own. And I have for the past 3 winters saved £1 sterling a month against the day I should know that you were alive. Elias's letters found me in September of '83. I did not at once believe them. When I did believe them, I did not at once believe I was ready to come. I was ashamed, Bronwyn. I was ashamed of the year after our father. I was ashamed of the hat box. I was ashamed, I think, most of all, of having let myself become a person you might not recognize. Elias wrote to me very gently that a sister knows a sister at any distance. He was a gentler man in his letters than I think he was in his own house, though I suspect he was gentle in both. You did not write often of him in your girlhood letters because you had not met him yet, but I have now read 4 years of his hand, and I know something of him. He was a good man. I grieve him as I can grieve a man I never met, which is from a distance. But, honestly, I had the ticket in October of last year for November. When no word came from him for the telegraph, I waited. I waited 4 months. And then I wrote to a firm of inquiry in Cheyenne, and I received in March a 1-line reply, which I have kept Elias Holloway, deceased November 14th, 1886. No further information. I did not write to you then, Bronwyn, because I did not know where you were, and I did not know if you had been taken care of, and I did not know. Forgive me whether any letter I sent into that silence would reach a woman still alive to read it. I wrote instead every month into Elias's name at the Cheyenne board the same 4-sentence letter in case. My ticket has been in my cedar chest since October. I bought it from the Canadian Pacific through to Cheyenne by way of Medicine Hat and Butte. It is open-dated. I have never yet surrendered it. I have only to present it at the station and board. Say the word, Bronwyn. I will come. I will come in a fortnight from the day you write it. I have only to arrange my relief on the ward, which I have already quietly been arranging, because I have known for 3 years that one day the word would come. Say it, and I will come. Your sister who has been for the whole of these 5 years coming toward you, one slow inch at a time. N. Bronwyn set the letter down. She sat at the table a long while with her palms flat on either side of it, the way a person sets their palms on the wood of a pew, in the moment after a funeral. She did not weep. She had done her weeping on a Thursday night for a boy with a candle, and she had found in the days since that a thing which breaks once does not always break again. It sometimes only loosens. Her grief tonight had loosened. She drank her tea. It had gone cold. She drank it anyway. Then she stood and she took down her writing box from the top of the pie safe, and she sat back down at the table, and she wrote in English this time, because in English it could be read by any hand that might intercept it. My dearest Neris, the word is yes. Come. But do not come to Cheyenne. I will come to you. Wait for me in Medicine Hat. Write me the date that suits you, and I will board the first train north after I have put my house in order. There is more to tell than a letter will hold. It will hold until we are across a table. Your sister, Bronwyn. She sealed it. She addressed it. She set it on the mantel for the Morning Post rider. Then she took down from the same writing box a second sheet of paper, and she wrote a shorter letter to a man whose address she had only once seen written out on the back cover of her husband's ledger. Thomas Thornton, Solicitor, Cheyenne. She wrote 3 lines to Mr. Thornton, and she asked him to come on the following Wednesday with his clerk to the Holloway Ranch to witness the drawing of an instrument of partition. Then she blew out the lamp. She did not yet know as she blew it out about the woman on the ridge side saddle, or about the gloves with the silver cuffs, or about the Latin phrase written under the name Holloway in a parlor of painted cedar shingles 8 miles south by the river road. She would know by the following Thursday. Thad Crow came on Tuesday morning with a split lip. He did not speak of the lip. She did not at first ask. He sat in her kitchen and drank the tea she poured him, and he set his hat on the table the way a man sets a hat when he is come on an errand he would rather not have. Ma'am, Mr. Crow, Silas Brockway came to my lot last night. She set down the pot. Alone. He had been drinking, but not as much as he meant you to think if the word came back. He came up my path with a revolver at his belt, and he did not draw it. I did not draw mine either. It is still on the peg by my door. I do not carry one as a rule on my own ground. What did he want? He wanted me to tell him what you know about his wife. She was quiet a long moment. His wife. Yes, ma'am. Her name, Mr. Crow. Constance Brockway. Born Constance Merton of Edinburgh. 40 years old, married to Silas these last 11 years. She keeps the books for the Diamond Bee. She is the one I have come to understand these last 2 weeks, who keeps a good deal more than the books. You have been at some inquiry, Mr. Crow. I have been, ma'am, since the Saturday that Mr. Merrick rode out. I did not say to you I would be because I was not sure yet what I would find. I have found now enough to come and say it to you. She nodded once. Say it. Thad Crow told her. Constance Brockway's father had been a geologist at the University of Edinburgh, a man of small reputation in his lifetime, and almost none after it who had come to the American West in the late 60s on a commission from a British mining concern, and who had died in 69 of a fever at Fort Laramie, leaving among his effects a single leather case containing survey notes. The notes had been shipped back to his widow and daughter in Scotland. The widow had died of the same fever by the ordinary cruelty of delay before the notes reached her. The daughter, then 22, had inherited them. She had read them. She had taught herself to read them. She had taught herself a great deal. Among the notes was a careful lettered map of a stretch of Wyoming Creek bottom, 10 miles square, on which her father had marked in 4 places the signature of an unusual subterranean water. He had sampled it. He had not, in the 2 weeks before his fever took him, had the time to patent his finding. The finding in plain words was that beneath a portion of what was then unclaimed government land, there ran a mineral spring of the sort that the great spa resorts of Saratoga and Hot Springs and the White Sulphur Country were in the 70s beginning to bottle and ship east at $5 the case. Constance Merton had not in Edinburgh the means to come to America on her own. She had come instead to America on the arm of a man. The man was Silas Brockway, an American cattle speculator on a buying trip to Scotland in the spring of '76. A man 12 years her senior. A man not of her class. A man who had seen in her Edinburgh drawing room a kind of woman he had not known existed, and who had within 6 weeks proposed. She had accepted within the hour. They had married in June. They had sailed in July. By September, they were in Wyoming. By the following spring, they were on the Diamond B, which was land Silas had bought with her counsel, precisely along the 4-point square her father's notes had marked. The square included at its northwest corner a wedge of 320 acres that had already been patented to a man named Kohler. The Kohlers had sold that wedge in '81 to Elias Holloway, which had meant for Constance Brockway that for 6 years the richest of her father's 4 points had lain by a quarter mile outside her reach. She had waited patiently the way she had been waiting since she was 22. She had let her husband run the cattle and beat the men and drink at the Laramie Hotel and be the visible face of the Diamond B. And she had kept the ledgers, and she had read the land patents at the county office, and she had waited for the death by any ordinary frontier means of Elias Holloway, who was 47 and who worked alone and who broke horses for his neighbors as a favor. November of '86 had given her the death. What she had not counted on, Thad Crow said, with the level weight of a man who had learned it one small interview at a time over 3 weeks, was the widow. She did not think, ma'am, that you would stand. She thought you would sell in the first month out of grief and go home to Liverpool. When you did not, she let her husband handle it in April his way. When his way did not work, she understood she had married the wrong instrument, and she took the thing back into her own hands. Bronwyn said nothing for a while. Then she said, "The rider on the ridge, Saturday last. Her. The fire in my hayshed. Her orders, not her hand. The woman in the crowd with the black glove. her ma'am, and Saturday's rider, Mr. Merrick. Her money through her husband's hand. She paid him $200 out of her own account at the bank in Cheyenne. I have a friend who works the counter there. He is a Methodist. He does not approve of her. Bronwyn let a slow breath out. And Silas last night at your door. He has begun, ma'am, to understand what he is married to. He is not a good man. He is not even a smart man. But he is, I think, a man who loved his wife after his fashion, and who is discovering this month that she did not love him, and has not loved him perhaps for any part of these 11 years. He came to my door last night because he wanted to know what you know, because he wanted to know what she is. He thinks now that you know. He is half right. How did you come by the lip, Mr. Crow? I told him to sit down at my table. He did not want to sit. He took a swing. It was not much of one. I sat him down after it. We spoke an hour. He left sober enough to ride. He did not draw the revolver. I want that on the record. It is on the record. They were quiet a while. She said, "Will he come here, Mr. Crow? To the ranch, to settle a thing himself?" "He may, ma'am. If he does, he will come the way a man comes who is not sure whether he is coming to kill a woman or to beg one to forgive him. I do not know last night which of those it will be. I do not think he knows either. Then I will not meet it alone. No, ma'am, you will not." He stood. He took his hat. At the door he said without turning, "I thought you should know. Also, I wrote a letter on Sunday. To Montana, to the boy. I have not yet posted it. It is in my coat pocket. I wrote it, I think, because you made scones." She did not trust her voice. She nodded. He went. Wednesday, Mr. Thornton, the solicitor, came from Cheyenne in a 2-seat buggy with his clerk, and Bronwyn laid out on the kitchen table the documents of title and the lines of a partition she had drafted 3 nights in a row. She did not partition the land to Thad Crow. She did not partition it to Micah Ford. She did not partition any piece of it to Neris yet to come. She partitioned it at its heart to herself. She clarified the deed. She placed alongside it a trust instrument, 5 pages, in which the Holloway Ranch as a whole was held in the name of Bronwyn Ashcombe Holloway, sole owner, with a lease in perpetuity to one Thaddeus Crow for the eastern 300 acres, for the sum of $1 a year for as long as he drew breath, renewable by his heirs for 30 years after, and with a second lease also in perpetuity for the western 180 acres to one Hazel Orr of Black Fork Township for $2 a year, for as long as she drew breath, renewable likewise. She did not yet know Mrs. Orr except by sight. She had seen her at the general store twice, a small woman in a plain bonnet with a sharp blue eye and a basket full of eggs. And she had heard her speak once to the shopkeeper in an Irish accent that carried the soft west of it, which she knew from her own ear to be Connaught country. That was the whole of her acquaintance with Mrs. Orr. She had, nonetheless, for reasons she could not yet put into words, named her in the trust. Mr. Thornton raised one eyebrow. He raised it only once. "Mrs. Holloway, the second lessee. I have not yet spoken with her, Mr. Thornton. You will hold the document with my signature on it in your office, unwitnessed on her part, until she has agreed. If she will not agree, Strike her name and I will name another. And the residual title. The residual title holds in my name. If I do not return from the journey I am about to take, the title passes by the terms of page 4 to my sister, Neris Ashcombe, of Medicine Hat, Saskatchewan. If she precedes me, it passes by page 5 to the lessees jointly. This is an unusual arrangement. Yes, Mr. Thornton. You will not, ma'am, forgive me for asking. You will not consider instead remarrying and settling the matter by the ordinary course. I will not, Mr. Thornton. Very good, ma'am. He signed. His clerk witnessed. She signed. The clerk witnessed her. Mr. Thornton gathered his papers in his hat, and he departed with the careful, slightly discomposed politeness of a man who has been in the room with a woman who has not in any of his 33 years of frontier practice existed before. At the door, the clerk turned. He was perhaps 25, a plain young man with a soft chin. He said quietly, so that Mr. Thornton, already in the buggy, did not hear, "Ma'am, I only want to say, my mother also is Welsh, from Aberystwyth. She has spoken of you, I think, in the town, though she has not met you. She calls you I wedu fach. It is well, ma'am. It is a term of regard. I thought you should know." The little widow. Bronwyn smiled for the first time in front of a man who was not Thad Crow or Micah Ford in 9 months. "Thank you, Mr. Pritchard, ma'am. Thank you, Mr. Pritchard. Please give your mother my regards. Tell her I will one day call on her in Cheyenne." He touched his hat. He went. Silas Brockway came at dusk on Thursday. He came as Thad Crow had said he might, not knowing himself whether he was coming to kill her or to ask her to forgive him. He came alone up the valley road at a walk, his paint horse tired and dark with sweat. He was not drunk. She could see that from the porch. He was also not sober in any useful sense. He was in the country between the two, which was the country a certain kind of man reached when he had been given in a single afternoon more to understand about his own life than he had been given in the whole of it before. She sat on the porch with the Winchester across her lap. Thad Crow did not sit with her. Thad Crow was inside the barn in the shadow of the tackroom door, where a man with a rifle can see every yard of the yard and the road both, and where Silas could not see him. Micah Ford was in the hayloft. She had not asked him. He had come on his own at 5 o'clock with his old single-shot carbine and 2 biscuits and a canteen of water, and he had climbed into the loft and had not said one word, and he had drawn the canteen up by the rope, and he had settled in. She had let him. A boy who had stood 16 feet from her gatepost in April, and had not moved had she understood certain accounts of his own to balance. Silas drew rein at the gate. He did not come up the drive. He sat his horse at the gate a long time looking at the house. The light behind him was the color of a bruise. Finally he called, not loud, "Mrs. Holloway, Mr. Brockway, may I come up?" "You may come up to the bottom step, Mr. Brockway. You may not come up the steps." He walked his horse up the drive. He stopped at the bottom step. He swung down. He did not tie the horse. He left the reins trailing, and the horse, tired, lowered its head and did not move. He took off his hat. He stood there a long moment in the yellow last light, a thick-set man of 50. The wire-colored beard gone grayer at the chin than she remembered the whites of his eyes, red with something that was not only whiskey. He said, I have come to say a thing, ma'am. I will say it. Then I will go. Say it. I did not know in April the whole of what I was doing. I knew some of it. I knew enough of it. I will not stand here and tell you I did not know I was a brute. I knew I was a brute. I have been a brute for 40 years. I was raised to it. It is not an excuse. I will not offer it as one. He drew a breath. But I did not know in April that the beating of you was not my own thought. I believed it was my own thought. I believed I had come to that notion by my own road. I came last night to the understanding that I had not. I came to the understanding that I'd been married for 11 years, to a woman who had, for 11 years, decided which of my thoughts were my own, and which were hers, dressed up in mine. I do not say this to beg your pardon. I say this because you are owed the knowing. I have not told her I know. I will not tell her. I will only tell you. He paused. He looked down at his hat. She is not, ma'am, going to stop. I am telling you also this so that you do not make tonight or next week the error of believing she will. She did not marry me for my name. She did not marry me for my bed. She married me for a wedge of creek bottom your husband bought out from under her 6 years ago. And she will have that wedge, or she will die having reached for it. I have been today and yesterday coming slowly into the knowing of this, and it is a slow sickness coming into me, ma'am. And I do not know what I will do with the rest of my life now that I have it. She was quiet. She said after a long time, Mr. Brockway, are you armed? No, ma'am. I left the revolver on the kitchen table at home. I did not want to come up your road with it. I did not trust what my hand might do with it. Lift your coat, Mr. Brockway. He lifted his coat. He turned. He let her see. There was no gun belt. There was no knife in his boot. He had come in his broadcloth and his shirt and his hat, and a great exhausted weight of himself and nothing else. Put your hat on, Mr. Brockway. He put it on. Go home. Ma'am, I did not come for You came because you did not know where else to come. I am not the place. You will go home. You will sleep in your own bed or on your own floor as you like. You will not tell your wife you came here. You will not tell your wife anything you have said to me or anything I have said to you. Tomorrow you will ride into Cheyenne, and you will speak to a man named Thomas Thornton, solicitor, Ferguson Building, 16th Street, and you will tell him I sent you, and you will place before him by sworn statement the whole of what you have said to me tonight. You will not sign your name to any deed of the Diamond B without his prior reading of it. You will not remove $1 from your joint account without his prior letter. You will, as of tomorrow morning, have a second man in your business, and that second man will be a stranger. And that stranger will be on your side, Mr. Brockway, which is, from what I hear, a side no one has been on in some long while. He stared at her. Why? He said. Why would you? Because, Mr. Brockway, I am not married to her, and you are, and I would not leave any man alone in that room without a witness. Not even the man who broke my ribs in April. He stood there. He stood there a very long time, and she saw on his large, unshaved frontier face the thing she had seen on very few faces in her life, which was the expression of a man who had, in the space of a single sentence, understood for the first time that he was owed kindness by someone he did not deserve it from, and that the kindness would not be withdrawn. It was not a pretty expression. It did not make him handsome. He did not weep. He was not that sort. But his mouth worked once, and his hand on the brim of his hat tightened, and he said in a voice that was half his ordinary voice and half something under it, "Ma'am, I am sorry. I know Mr. Brockway. I did not mean in April. I know Mr. Brockway. Go home." He turned. He mounted. At the gate, he looked back once and he touched the brim of his hat to her. And it was a different touch of the hat than any he had given in any of their meetings before. And she returned it once from the porch. He rode out into the dark. She sat on the porch with the Winchester across her lap until she could not hear his hooves any longer. And then she sat a long while more. After a time, Thad Crow came out of the barn, and Micah Ford came down out of the loft, and the three of them stood in the yard, and Micah said quietly, "Ma'am, I didn't have to shoot nobody. No, Mr. Ford, you did not. That's a mercy. It is." Thad Crow said, "You did not need me either, ma'am." She looked at him a long moment before she answered. Then she said evenly, "Mr. Crow, I do not agree, and I want you to hear me say so. I needed you in the dark of that barn door tonight. I needed Mr. Ford in the loft. I needed Mrs. Orr to have accepted by Tuesday a lease she had not been asked for. I have done these last 4 months a thing I was told once as a girl not to do, which is to carry all the work of my life on one pair of hands. I was told it by my grandmother, and I did not believe her then, and I have been until this week, still not believing her. I am believing her now. I needed you. Say it back to me so that I know you have heard it." Thad Crow looked at her. He said, "I heard it, ma'am." Good. They went inside together and she fed them both, and she did not that night ride out to see Constance Brockway. She rode out the following Monday in the full daylight through the front gate of the Diamond Bee alone. The meeting between the two women is not, in the end, the great scene of this story. It was when it happened a quieter thing than either woman had planned. They sat in a front parlor of painted cedar shingles. Constance Brockway had waited for her for perhaps a quarter hour, in a high-backed chair, her hands gloved black, her gray dress cut plain and excellent. She rose when Bronwyn entered. Bronwyn did not take off her own coat. She did not sit. She stood by the parlor door. Constance stood by the window. They looked at each other across a rug that had been imported at some expense from a loom in Yorkshire. Bronwyn said, "Mrs. Brockway." "Mrs. Holloway, I have come to say 4 things to you. I will say them in order. I will not take tea. I will not sit down." "Very well. The first. Your husband is not at this hour aware that I am here. He is at this hour in the office of my solicitor in Cheyenne. He will not come home tonight. He has matters of his own to arrange. You will not, when he does return, speak to him about me, or about your father's notes, or about any wedge of creek bottom, or about any rider out of Montana. If you speak to him of any of these things, he will know within the hour that I have been here, and what I have said to you, because I have made arrangements to that effect, and you will thereby have confirmed by your own hand every piece of the record against you." Constance's mouth opened. The second. Your father's notes are not as you have believed them to be, the only record of the water. In the year before he died, my husband came by means I have only lately understood into enough suspicion of his own ground that he paid for an assay to be made of the water from the North Quarter. That assay lies now in a sealed envelope in the office of Thomas Thornton, Solicitor, Cheyenne. In the event of my death by any cause other than natural and documented disease, the envelope will be opened, and its contents will be posted to the Cheyenne Leader and the Rocky Mountain News within 48 hours. I have seen the assay, Mrs. Brockway. It names the water. It names the ground. It will not name you. But you will be the only person the newspapers will know to ask. Constance's knuckles above the black glove had gone white. The third, I do not want your spring. I do not want your map. I do not want your father's work. I do not want a single dollar of the profit that any bottling house in the East might one day make of the water that runs beneath my land. I want, Mrs. Brockway, for you to leave me and mine alone. And I want more, particularly, for you to leave your husband alone, which is to say, I want you to pack your trunks, and I want you to go. I do not care where you go. I would suggest a city. Edinburgh is a city. San Francisco is a city. You are 40 years old. You have, if you are careful, another 30 years of life in you. You may choose in any of them not to be a woman who burns a widow's hayshed in the dark. She paused. The fourth, Mrs. Brockway, I want you to know that I do not hate you. My father and yours were both ruined men. Yours was ruined by a fever at Fort Laramie, and mine was ruined by a friend at a debtor's bench in Liverpool. Yours left you a map. Mine left me a sister I was 7 years finding. We are two women who have been trying in our own ways to finish our father's errands. You have been trying the wrong way. I am asking you to stop. Constance Brockway did not speak for a long time. Then she said, quite low, You are not what I thought you were, Mrs. Holloway. No, I am not. I believed since April that you were a woman who would break. I know you did. What broke, Mrs. Holloway? I did, Mrs. Brockway. In April. In the yard. I broke then. I have been since a different woman. That is the thing you did not account for. You accounted for the woman in the yard. You did not account for the woman she became between April and August. Constance Brockway walked slowly to a small writing desk by the window. She opened a drawer. She took from it a single folded leather case. The case her father had carried out of Fort Laramie in the winter of '69, 19 years ago. Now a case that had crossed an ocean once in grief, and an ocean again in ambition, and had sat 19 years in the drawer of whatever house held its owner's heart. She set it on the desk. She looked at it a long moment. Then she turned. She crossed the room. She held the case out to Bronwyn. Take it. I do not want it. I am not Mrs. Holloway giving it to you as a thing to want. I am giving it to you as a thing I no longer wish to own. Burn it. Bury it. Keep it in a drawer of your own. I do not care. Only let it out of mine. Bronwyn, after a moment, took the case. The two women stood a moment longer, each with one hand on the leather. Constance Brockway said, I will be gone by Sunday, Mrs. Holloway. Yes, I will not see him again. It is, I believe, the kindest thing I can do for him at this late stage. Tell him when he comes home, tell him I said so. I will tell him. And Mrs. Holloway, yes, I do not ask you to forgive me. I know what I have done. I only ask you to remember when you think of me that a woman who is given a map at 22 and nothing else becomes in time a woman who cannot see any country but the country of the map. I did not see you. I saw a wedge. It was a failure of my own eyes. I am sorry for it. I know Mrs. Brockway. Good day, Mrs. Holloway. Good day, Mrs. Brockway. Bronwyn walked out of the parlor of painted cedar shingles with the leather case under her arm. She did not, on the ride home, open it. She never opened it. The case sat for the rest of her natural life on the high shelf above the bread crock in a kitchen far to the north, unopened, a kept thing of another woman's country, and in its quiet a kind of mercy. The last 5 weeks in Wyoming went quickly, the way the last weeks of any life do. Neris wrote, "I will wait for you." I have taken the small room next to mine and put a bed in it. Come when you can. I will be here. Hazel Orr, who had accepted on a warm Tuesday afternoon in her own kitchen, the Western lease with a grave nod and a single squeeze of Bronwyn's hand, walked across the ridge every second day after that with eggs or with advice, and she began in small ways to move her own small life nearer to the Holloway line, though she had not yet given up her cottage in the township. Thad Crow, on the Wednesday before Bronwyn left, rode over with a small wooden box and a blanket in his saddle roll. He stayed the day. In the afternoon, they walked together up the low hill behind the house and stood a while at Elias's marker. He did not say much at the grave. He said later on the walk down, "I mailed a letter to Montana yesterday. To the boy. I do not know yet whether he will write back. I do not expect that he will at first. I thought you ought to know I mailed it." "I'm glad, Mr. Crow." "Yes, ma'am." On the Thursday, she sat with Micah Ford in the kitchen, and together by lamplight they opened the letter from his father. It was a short letter. Micah's father, whose name was Jeremiah Ford, was a journeyman carpenter at a mill in Chicago. He had written in 1880, when his son was 12, that he had come back through the Laramie country looking for the boy's mother the previous spring, and she had already gone, and no one in the town had known where. And he had written this letter and left it with the innkeeper, in case she came back through. He had asked in the letter that the boy, if he was alive and if he was old enough, and if he was able and if he wished to, might come to Chicago to the address given, and that there was work at the mill, and that there was a bed in his house, and that there had not been for any of the last 12 years a day when he had not thought of the boy. He had signed it, "Your father, if you will have me." Micah Ford read the letter twice slow, with his lips moving in Bronwyn's kitchen. When he had finished the second reading, he folded it and he put it in his breast pocket, and he sat a long time with his hand flat over it. Bronwyn did not speak. After a long time, he said, "Ma'am, I am going to Chicago in the spring. I would like, if you do not mind, to stay on at your place through the winter and to help Mr. Crow run the east pasture and to save the wages. I would come back in time. I would not stay in Chicago forever. I would come back one day to check on the place, if that is all right." "It is more than all right, Mr. Ford." "Yes, ma'am." He stood. He put on his hat. At the door, he turned. "Ma'am, I will learn to write the whole thing someday. The whole of the letter I would send back to him. I can only write my name right now. And yours. I can write your name. I know, Mr. Ford. I wanted you to know that I could." He went. She took the morning train out of Cheyenne on a Friday the 14th of October, 1887, at 10 minutes past 7 in the morning. Thad Crow drove her to the station in the buggy. Micah Ford rode beside the buggy on a borrowed gelding. Hazelore was waiting on the platform with a parcel of sandwiches wrapped in brown paper, which she pressed into Bronwyn's arms without ceremony. None of them wept. Bronwyn, on the platform, turned to Thad Crow last. He stood with his hat in his hand. She did not reach for him. He did not reach for her. They had not in 3 months touched each other once, and they did not touch each other now. She said, "Mr. Crow." "Ma'am, I will not come back." "I know. It is not because I do not trust you. It is because if I came back, I would come because I was frightened to be alone. That is not a good enough reason. You deserve better than a woman arriving at your gate for that reason. Go to Montana, Mr. Crow. Go find your son. Do not stay on my porch waiting for a train that is not coming. We have been these 5 months enough for each other. Be now enough for him." Thad Crow did not answer at once. Then he said quietly, "Yes, ma'am." And a moment later, "I will go in the spring, same as the boy. I will ride north when he rides east." "Good." She held out her hand. He took it. They shook once firmly the way two people shake who have concluded an honest piece of business. The train whistle blew. She boarded. She took the seat nearest the window. The train pulled out. Thad Crow stood on the platform with his hat in his hand until the train was out of sight, and Micah Ford stood beside him and Hazel Orr stood beside the two of them, and none of them moved until the dust of the train had settled on the rail. Then Thad Crow put on his hat. "Well," he said, and the three of them walked back up the platform toward the horses. The stallion Kingfisher lived another 17 months. He died on a cold March night in 1889, lying down in his own corral of an ailment. The visiting veterinary from Laramie called simply old age, though he was only 11, which meant that an old age had come to him through some other door. Thad Crow was with him. He had slept in the barn the last 3 nights. He had known for perhaps a week. When the horse went down, he went down with him in the straw, and he held the great black head in his lap, and he told him in a low, steady voice about a woman in a coat in a town in Canada, who was, he believed at that hour, likely asleep, and he told him about a boy in Chicago who had sent the week before his first letter back 3 lines in a careful hand. And he told him also about a pale-haired boy in a Montana house of his own who had opened the door in September to a stranger on the step and had said after a long, hard silence, "Come in." The stallion listened. The stallion's breathing slowed. The stallion's eye at the last was soft. Thad Crow buried him with Micah Ford and Hazel Orr's eldest nephew on the low hill behind the house, in the grave he had dug the previous afternoon beside Elias Holloway's marker at a distance of 4 feet. He set as a marker a single flat sandstone on which he had chiseled by hand over 2 evenings the one word Kingfisher, and under it the 2 dates and under them the 3 words, "He was enough." He wrote the next morning to the woman in Canada. The letter reached her in the 2nd week of April. She read it at her kitchen table in the tailor's shop. She and her sister had opened above the druggist's on Allowance Avenue, in the full, thin prairie light of a medicine hat morning. She read it 3 times. She did not weep at the first reading. She wept at the second, and she was quiet at the third. And when she had folded it, she got up and she crossed the room and she took down from the top shelf of the press the small cloth bundle that had come with her from Wyoming. The cloth that smelled still very faintly of dried clover and yew oil and bog myrtle. And she laid it one last time against her cheek. She stood that way a while. Then she went back downstairs to the shop where a girl of 7 was waiting for her piano lesson in the back room. And she laid her hand on the child's shoulder. And she said in her grandmother's Welsh, "Come, Cariad, play me the first 4 bars, and tell me what you hear." And the child played them small hands, not yet accurate, and Bronwyn Ashcombe Holloway listened and corrected one note with a touch and smiled. Beyond the window, the prairie went on in its plain, enormous way toward a country she had not known she was walking to. For 5 years, an inch at a time, she had arrived.